My goal is to go out on an operation and not say a damn word. And as a leader, that's what you want, because as we lead, we want to be leading by minimum force, by the minimum force required. And every time you have to open your mouth to reprimand somebody, you actually lose leadership capital. You know, lately I've been talking a lot about culture being the ultimate form of decentralized command. I know that I talked about it when we were at Gettysburg. What's awesome about culture is it's the ultimate form of decentralized command. If my organization has a strong culture, then everyone can make decisions just based on the understanding of that culture. And that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, if you go a little bit stronger, a really strong culture can actually develop into something that something that I've read is officially called peer discipline, which I didn't used to call it peer discipline. I guess that's the official politically correct term. The term that I've always used, and I'm sure you've heard me say this, is gang mentality. And what's positive about having a strong culture, and what's positive about peer discipline, and what's positive about a gang mentality is that the gang polices itself. That's what's awesome about having a strong gang mentality inside of a team, is that the gang actually polices itself. It takes care of itself. It's a self-policing organization. So when someone was late in task unit bruiser, I didn't ever say anything to anyone for being late, because the gang tightened them up. If someone forgot a piece of gear for an important operation, I didn't ever have to say a word, because the gang tightened them up. If somebody did something that denigrated the team, the platoon, the task unit, I didn't have to say a word, because the gang would handle the problem, because we had this culture. And as a leader, that's what you want. Because as we lead, we want to be leading by minimum force, by the minimum force required. And every time you have to open your mouth to reprimand somebody, you actually lose leadership capital. Even a little tiny thing. Anytime you have to correct someone, you expend leadership capital. So we want to have that gang mentality. So then the question becomes, okay, how do we create that culture? And it's very hard to script and create a culture and impose it on people. It's very difficult. It will take generations to pull that off, in my opinion. But if you can have it develop in an organic manner, that will take hold tighter. Now, make no mistake, just because I'm saying you can't impose it on people doesn't mean that it doesn't come from you, because it does. And what's awesome about this, when I say it comes from you, I mean you. And it doesn't matter where you are in the chain of command. You are in charge of culture. Leif, I hear you talking about this sometimes. I will say I was never in a bad SEAL platoon. And first of all, people got to understand that there's such a thing as a bad SEAL platoon. And it might not be that they're a total disaster, but they're not a tight unit and they don't do a good job. They do an okay job. They're acceptable, but they're not what you want. They're not how you want it to be. And that's because in every platoon I was in, I always had a little gang of guys. You know, and no, I'm not just talking about me. I hung around with good guys and we created this culture. And when you have that good culture, it's a powerful thing. But culture isn't one big monolithic singular structure. It's not one person. It's more like a field, like a giant field made up of individual blades of grass. But you take that whole field, and you know, I'm coming back from being out west, and you see these majestic fields. And that thing, when you see all those blades of grass unified together, that thing has power, and that thing has energy, and that thing has strength. And every one of those blades of grass actually matters, just like every person inside of an organization matters. So if you are part of a team, then you actually set the culture. I don't care where you are. And we always hear the quote, leading by example. We always hear that quote, you got to lead by example. But that is especially true when we're talking about culture, because how we behave and what we actually do, how we behave and what we actually do is the root of culture. And if we can set the right culture and we can thereby imply the right intent, then we can have people making decisions with no guidance whatsoever. With no guidance whatsoever. You mentioned on the podcast we just did that my goal is to go out on an operation and not say a damn word. And that was my goal. Because if we're pulling that off, that means everybody understands the culture and everybody already knows the right thing to do. So we have to pay attention to that when we're part of a team. But on top of that, there's another place where you set the culture, and that is in yourself. You set culture in the way you behave in yourself, the things that you actually do. What you allow yourself to be, the words you speak, the things you say and the things you don't say. That sets the culture in your head, in your mind, and in your life. So pay attention. Pay attention to those little things. Pay attention to every little blade of grass in your head. Pay attention to what you do, not just to make your culture better or your team better, but to make yourself better. It's probably not a good time to waste leadership capital trying to jump up and yell, hey, pick me, pick me. It's a no-brainer who I'm going to pick.